None of us want to be leaders that resist change. It often happens by accident or us not being intentional about what God has for us to do. So today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to talk about 5 thoughts on why leaders resist change.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian. Joining me is Dylan Dodson, and today we're talking about 5 thoughts on why leaders resist change.
Yeah, so I think we've all been in situations where we had a leader above us that we were frustrated with who would not try something new.
Yeah.
And then we forget when we are that leader, we don't see it in ourselves. And so these are some things to consider. Maybe you've experienced them, but maybe to just do some self-reflection on, because as the culture changed, obviously was the mission doesn't change, but the method does. And so how do we become adaptable? These are some things that keep us from becoming adaptable. So just some things to think about why we as leaders can sometimes resist change. Right. So here's number 1, and maybe one of the biggest ones, is that it has worked in the past. So maybe you were doing something that was successful in the past. You could think, there's lots of examples of maybe certain Sunday school models, vacation Bible school. Probably getting in trouble here saying some things. I'm not saying they don't always work in cultures today, but I'm just saying, just because something worked in the past, we kind of view it as it can never change. I will never change. And sometimes it's an emotional thing because it changed our life. Mm-hmm. And of course, so when we change things, we want to be respectful. But one of the big reasons why we resist change is because we assumed what worked in the past will always work in the future. One of the phrases that I cannot stand is when people say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like that's a terrible thing, because what often happens is that if you never adjust or give maintenance to or change the direction of things that are happening, eventually when it actually breaks, it's like beyond repair or it's super expensive. Think of your car, like you do regular maintenance. If you wait till something completely breaks, then you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. And I think one example I always use is social media. Facebook has been around forever in terms of social media world usage. Right. And it's still growing. It's not MySpace, it's not all these things that came and went and died. Google Plus just died recently. All those things. Why? They are constantly changing. And what happens all the time, it doesn't happen as much now, but especially in the earlier years, every time something changed, everyone's like, I hate it, this is dumb. Yeah. And then what happened? People used it more, and more people got on the platform.
Liked it. Yep.
What happened was they didn't wait till it was fixed. They were proactive about changing, and we can get really stuck in the way things used to be, which will stop us from innovating in the future.
I think we can get in trouble by thinking that that good is perfect. And so I think we can see something that worked in the past and it worked well, but we get this thought in our mind, and I think where we get more and more, get this thought in our head more and more, the further we are removed from it. So the further in the past it is, that we think just because something was good, we start thinking that it was perfect or it had no flaws and it can't be improved. Yeah. And hey, whatever it was, maybe it was good. Maybe it was close to perfect. But I think if we always have that mindset of it's not perfect, it can be improved. And so even if something that we did, if this is just going back to the examples you give, like a yearly thing that we do, like VBS or something like that, just because it was good last year doesn't mean it can't be better this year. Right. Or doesn't mean we can't figure out things to change and improve, because over time, even if something is good last year and good this year, over time it's going to get stale. And if we don't change it, it's going to die.
That's right.
I don't know what the word is.
It's going to go. That's good. But that's big reason number 1 is that it works in the past, so we feel like there's no point in changing it at all for the future. Number 2, especially in church world, that new is somehow considered bad. Yes. Look no further than music. Right? Anytime a new instrument is used, a new style of music, everybody freaks out when it was always new. Like at one point, the organ was new. I remember there's an article of an organ in Texas that the people didn't like it, the church members, so they ripped out the organ from the church and threw it in a lake nearby. And now it's now it was maybe drums or modern music. Like just because something is new doesn't mean it's bad. Now sometimes things that are new maybe need some vetting or whatever. Sure. But there's just this idea that new is bad, and because even though we forget, like hymnals were written at some point. They weren't always around. Like a lot of the famous ones that we know were bar tunes written by Martin Luther and some other people that they took popular songs that were not very Christ-centered and made them Christ-centered. And today we don't even, like if that happened today, if someone changed a secular song to a Christian song, people would be all up in arms. Right. That's what hymns are. And everyone's like, hymns are the best thing ever, which they're great. But new is somehow considered bad. And so we don't try new things for no other reason than we just assume that the way that things were, the way things are always supposed to be.
Yeah, I think we just need to remember that new and old don't correlate to good or bad. Right. There are new ideas that may be terrible, but there are also new ideas that may be good. And so, yeah, you're right. Especially in this church world, it's so easy to think that like things like innovation are automatically tied with you just want to have a big church, or any new thing we do, it's you're not okay with the way the church has been. You just want to change things so that you can have a big church. That seems to be where the conversation always goes. When in reality, I mean, just the most traditional church we have today is way different than the church 100 years ago, right. Even. I mean, and let alone even further along than that. So, yeah, new is not good or bad. New is just something different, and different can be good.
Right. And so I would say, especially for those of us that are church leaders, don't be intimidated or feel attacked when someone has a new idea.
Yeah.
I mean, vet it, see if it's good, but just because it's new does not mean it's bad. It's one big reason why leaders resist change, especially in ministry. Number three, and the third reason why leaders resist change is because it's intimidating to learn something new, especially the more comfortable you are with a process or a system or more experiences you have a certain way. You know, you could feel maybe intimidated that someone knows it better than you, or you're just used to how it used to be, how doing it this way, even though it's super inefficient.
Yeah.
And I get it because maybe it's a power thing. You don't want to give something away, but letting our insecurities and our egos get in the way of doing new things because we're intimidated about having to learn something.
Yeah. Doing things the way it's been is safe. And safe is comfortable. Yeah. I mean, safe is, we know it's not, or most likely it's not going to fail because we've been doing it over and over. So to try something new is intimidating because it could fail.
Right.
But I mean, if we don't have that, mindset that something could fail, we're never going to do anything different.
Right. Like I know a lot of people say the older you get, when I was a kid, this happened. And now that I'm getting older, I always vowed that I would not be one of those people. I feel like I've kept that vow pretty good. Now I've got some friends that are starting to say it.
Yeah.
They're like, well, when we were a kid, and I'm like, part of the reason is because they think, new is bad.
Yeah.
So we always say that. But part of the reason is because people are intimidated, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe someone doesn't know how to use a smartphone. So they would say, well, back in my day, we had flip phones, or we didn't need cell phones.
Yeah.
And what they're really frustrated at is the insecurity of not, and this is a stereotypical example, of not being able to use a smartphone,
right.
But they're couching it in as they're unnecessary because they're not being honest about what their insecurity is.
Yeah.
And I think for church leaders, we really do a disservice to our people and to our churches if it's our ego that's getting it in the way of starting new things because we're just intimidated of having to learn something, even if we might not be good at it.
Right.
So that's number three. It's intimidating to learn something new. Here's number four, that things are broken and we don't see it. So things are broken and we don't see it. This also goes with the whole, if it's not broke, you don't fix it. Yeah. A lot of times things need to be fixed way sooner than you fix them, and then you're stuck with a problem that you can no longer fix.
Yeah.
And what happens is we're again so used to seeing things the way that they are that we don't see the flaws and the cracks for what they are. Like you talked about in the last episode, we're talking about how people can feel unwelcome. Maybe bringing a friend in who doesn't want to go to church, but just will say, hey, can you just come in and look at the space and see what makes sense, what doesn't, right? Because they're new, they actually can see what's actually not working. And if we insulate ourselves and are not open to outside ideas, things are actually breaking right before our eyes, but we're used to seeing it that way, and it's a slow break maybe, so we haven't seen how bad it's gotten.
What did you say? It was a while back. Someone said this too, and we may have even mentioned on the podcast that once, as a church leader, once you see something that needs to be fixed, the congregation has seen it for a long time or something along those lines.
It was like a lot of times us as staff and ministry leaders, we're like, we're stressing out at a problem, we see an issue, and we're afraid to fix it. When the reality is, if you know that it's an issue, a lot of times your church has seen it as an issue for a while, and they're wondering why the staff isn't doing anything about it.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy in the church world to get stuck in, or to not get stuck in, but to miss those things, because as long as people are showing up and attendance may be growing a little bit or steady and not declining, it's easy to think, well, nothing's broken, we're not shutting our doors. And so many churches, we see so many churches are shutting their doors and we aren't, so things must be going okay. And to not realize that, hey, there might be some big issues that we're not addressing, or maybe even small issues, maybe not huge issues, but maybe some things that could be fixed to be much better, but we just get comfortable in the way things are.
Right. And so I would say, don't be afraid to ask the people in your church how things are going. Ask people that you trust. Hey, I've been thinking about this. What do you think? I'm not a big fan of surveys. So I would say, and I've talked about this before, one of the favorite books that I read, I think I read in this past December, was called Everybody Lies. It's like people just say things on surveys because they want to say them that way. And groupthink is actually not a good way to be innovative, because the more people you have making a decision, the less innovative it's likely to be, because people like normal. So I'm not saying pull your congregation every time you want to change something, but ask trusted people who maybe are not staff, who maybe don't work in the office all week. Hey, what do you think about this design? Or what do you think about my preaching? Or what do you think about this? Get some outside perspective so that you actually can have people who might be more who are also emotionally removed from whatever's happening, to be able to be honest about what's going on, so you actually can find problems before it's too late.
Yeah, it's good.
So things that are broken and we don't see it are one reason we resist change, because things need to change and we don't recognize it. And then number 5, and then this might be the bigger one, the more, I don't know, I don't want to use ego, but maybe the more I don't know. I'll just say it. You can give me a word.
Right.
That the new idea wasn't ours.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the big reason why we resist it, is not because it's a bad idea, but because somebody else is going to get credit. Someone else is going to get the success for it. Someone else is going to be talked well about because they thought of it before we are. And so we come up with all these reasons why we shouldn't do it, when it's really, we were not the person that had the idea to begin with.
And I think it's so easy to hear this one and think, oh, of all of them, this is the
Right.
one I'm not guilty of, but I think we're all guilty of it at some point. I mean, we want to, it's like in the church world, we want to have ideas. We don't want anyone to necessarily have credit for it because all glory goes to God. So we don't want the credit if it's our idea, but we just want people to know, like,
Right.
don't give me the credit for it, but I want to make sure everyone knows that it was me. But I think that's a huge one because we're all flawed and broken people, and
Yep.
we can try and act like it's not an issue, but it is. And
Yep.
if it's not our idea, it's automatically a less good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So again, we let our ego get in the way because we want the credit, we want the success. And so we're less likely to hear other people. Even if everyone else is like, yeah, that's a great idea, you'll come up with some reason why you shouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why you resist change. It's not because you're anti-change, you're just anti you being the one that did it.
Yeah, and I think we a lot of times do this unconsciously. We don't. I think a lot of times we don't make a decision like, I'm going to turn that down because it's not my idea.
Right.
And so because we don't do that, a lot of us aren't thinking like, this is an issue for me. But
Right.
we do it unconsciously. We want our own ideas to succeed, and if they're not our ideas.
Right. And the ironic thing about this list is easy to go through and be like, I don't do that. I don't do
Yep.
that. I don't do that. But then you see leaders who maybe were above you or that you've been under who did all those things, who probably also thought, I don't do that. I don't do that.
Yep.
And so again, just being honest, not having an ego. If you want to be a good leader, you've got to be willing to get feedback and be honest about the situation that you're in. And so those are some of the ways that we've seen, again, that leaders resist change.
Mm-hmm.
It's worked in the past. New is somehow considered bad. It's intimidating to learn something new. Things are broken and we don't see it, or the new idea wasn't ours, or a combination of the above.
Yes.
So thanks for listening today. As always, practicalplanting.com/questions if you have something you want us to talk about in a future episode. And if you enjoy this podcast or this video, however you're consuming this content, we would love for you to share it with a friend.
Yeah.
And also leave a rating and review. Make it easier for other people to find.
That'd be great.
Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on Practical Church Planning. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planning. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planning, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planning on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.